Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Eviction Notice. It's been a while, but we're back. Me and Lewis are back, and we're here with Tink Zorg. Tink Zorg, how are you? It's been a moment.
Yeah, it's been a while, but you've been busy with, Patchgate and everything from what I've been hearing, spreading the word of the party of God.
Yes. And
Yes.
also, I went viral over like complaint with lasagna prices somehow. Like we
Oh
we've
yeah, I saw
we've
that.
had a lot
You
of
also went viral for the whole British thing too, dude. Like
oh yeah.
right,
We've
that
had,
happened while I was in Vegas. Which, by the
yeah.
way, we also caught a little bit of flack for me going on Jake Shields. It's been a moment of controversy, and
Yeah.
I know since we're on YouTube, I don't know if I can say the guy's name, but we did a space about ER,
Yeah.
and what happened with Elias. That
Yes.
made a lot of people mad. I think someone called for Antelope Hill to be thrown in prison over that, which they had nothing to do with that. So that
Yeah.
was funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, Patchgate happened. Supposedly what I heard, for anybody that doesn't know, and also whoever's watching, you can
Fire
go
merch.
to Antelope Hill and get the patch, the American and Party of God patch. It has the Hezbollah logo with George
Stylized.
Washington in it.
Yeah, stylized. It's a
Um,
musket, not an AK. It's George Washington instead of like a building.
yep, yep.
Good good
But
time.
people really got upset about that, and for no reason. Um, because it is just saying all it is saying is signaling. All it's signaling is I'm American, who is not a leftist, who also supports Hezbollah. That's all. That's all it's for. That's all it is. And people got really mad at it over the usual complaints, right? It's Muslim, it's third world, da 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 da. But by extension, I mean George Washington was also a revolutionary, fighting against a foreign occupier. And so if you're going to call Hezbollah third worldist, I mean, you do have to call Washington one. Um,
Yeah,
so like I don't.
it's very fun. Like this whole ideology that like to it's people who want to like they're simultaneously trying to do like founding fathers like deification and like so we were like, oh, you're not taking the founding fathers like serious enough, and also but also like making cartoon but like also making cartoon caricatures of them, like George Washington would fly into a rage if he saw this, which is like also unlikely. Like George Washington was a regular guy. He actually famously, not to like not that you need to defend the patch, but Washington famously has a letter where he says like we should import laborers from all over the world, be they like Mohammedan or atheists or whatever, because we need like this country to work.
I mean, people LARP about the Barbary Pirates Wars, right?
Yeah,
Does
but like
does anyone forget? Does everyone forget that the peace agreement we made with the pirates explicitly said that like our government is not founded upon Christianity and like we are a secular nation that
yeah,
embrace like
well
that
yeah,
was like the peace agreement they made
yeah.
with the Barbary pirates. Like I
Yeah.
don't.
Well, just and like frankly, the idea of like Hezbollah is famously a Republican party, like Republican in the small R sense. Like, there's actually, I mean,
In the real sense.
you don't need to make an argument that like this is all downstream like of the American Revolution. Like the reason, like even the process of like decolonization, which freed Lebanon from French control. Like the and of course, famously George Washington was a quote unquote a terrorist, right? Like treason against like the kind of comparisons have always like been made. I was actually more worried about like the far right people saying like, "How dare you besmirch the heroes of the lion of like the
Yeah,
lions
that's
of the Becca
Anne
Valley."
Leftoid saying like Washington was like a slave owner and how dare
Yeah.
you?
Well, no,
You know that.
I saw that you're more Nazi than now guys saying stuff like, "You have besmirched the party of God by associating with them with this bourgeois, capitalist," which whatever, like fine, like I'll take the criticism is fine, but like the patch is also just like kind of funny, and I don't know. The best part of this whole thing is people like making up stories about like Antelope Hill is like secretly not like they're like not actual Americans. Like it's a I don't know. We had people who got mad at this
Well,
guy
I
were
mean,
really
we
fucking
can
mad.
we can skip the real reason people got mad is because it was my patch, right? It's
They
partnered with.
don't like Doomernet, and also
They
they don't
don't
use
like me. That's what
yeah.
they're upset about because, and also it's like where because some guy was like people were saying that like Antelope Hill are like not conservatives. They don't care about America. Da 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 da. It's like, yeah, they're not conservatives. Like, you think the people who print fucking Nazi books are like Republicans? Is that like what you? Where would you ever get that from?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like,
No, that was people were saying like LMAO. What happened to your based America First publishing company? It's like, wait. Antelope Hill has never been an America First like project. Like Antelope Hill does like it's like they do like stuff about fume and like inter. I would say like academic studies of interwar fascism on like southern and central Europe are not like particularly American.
Well, Antelope Hill published the Japanese fascist book about, that that national policy thing. Right, that was Japanese. It's like no one bitched about that.
Yeah,
that's not white.
Yeah,
what's the?
I mean,
they try to do the whole Muslim thing, but it's like, Hezbollah is infamously known for not being sectarian.
Yeah,
they can't be. They're in Lebanon.
Yeah, people are just. I also think just invoke like notions of whiteness and brownness to police along. It's like
but their notions of whiteness and brownness have nothing to do with whiteness or brownness, though. That's
but they're just policing along like their whatever lines, and of course. The thing is, people forget this is just like a social scene. This is like the right wing or far right or populist or whatever you want to call like this sphere that we all use on the internet. It is a scene in the same way that K-pop is a scene. Like you cannot police people.
There's fan clubs and shit.
I will just we will just ignore you. Like fundamentally, everyone like you can't like all you can do is cry on the internet. Like it is what it is.
What's that? What's the name of that guy? Raw Egg Nationalist who posted that? Like, you will never be A10,
Aryan,
blue-eyed like Aryan because you aren't like us.
Yeah.
And then this guy is like a first-generation immigrant. His mom had to leave Libya because of Gaddafi. He's not fucking A10 or anything close to it. He's at the bottom of the pyramid himself.
Well, he does this LARP where he says he's just a swarthy Welsh guy. So he like tries to LARP and say that he is like a native.
But it's like funny.
But it's like, we've seen you. You're not just swarthy. Like you have nappy hair and brown. Like fuck no, dude. Like you are African.
and it's
and you can be that guy. But I think a lot of it is to some degree an anxiety because as someone who is like. A blue-eyed combat veteran whose family's been here since the fucking my family was given a land grant by the King of Spain that predates like the founding of the American government. Like, I don't have any anxiety. I think a lot of the you're brown or white coded comes from a level of anxiety people have about like being included, and I think the reason that I get to like read whatever based like. I can just enjoy Hezbollah materials or whatever. I can read Che Guevara. I don't feel any kind of like I'm betraying I know I'm a white guy. I don't have any of this anxiety. It feels like it's oddly like more about self-policing when they say, when some guy who's like, of, mixed race, which is, fine, be what you're going to be, is like calling you brown coded. It's like,
this is how it's always worked. Like, and again, like if you look at the people inside the quote unquote sphere, like a lot of these people are first generation immigrants, Anna Kashian or whatever her name is.
A lot of them are Michelings.
Yeah. So it's like, of course they're gonna be like the most sort of racist people I've encountered on Twitter, who are like the most sort of, how dare you tweet this on a white man's site, you fucking nigger, like to me. Like, these people are all Jews. I'm sorry to say, like, this is just how it is. Well, and at some point you start laughing at it.
Yeah, but also I do want to say something about that, which is that even if they're Jews or if they could just be normal white guys, a lot of these guys' politics are just Republican, and like that's what they get mad at. Yes, when you come out and
they say whiteness, they mean like Republican.
They mean Republican Party. They mean conservatism. Yeah. They mean Donald Trump. That's what they mean. When they say that you're brown coded, what they mean is that you're not voting for the Republican Party. Yes. Which, by the way, just to be clear here, the Republican Party is brown coded. Yeah, a majority of Hispanics did vote for the Republican Party. Blacks and gays are becoming more Republican.
Yeah.
The Republican Party is becoming an intersectional LGBTQ non-white party. And that was always what the Republican Party was going to turn into
They've been saying for 30 years
mass
that was the
migration
goal.
happens.
You know,
That's
well,
what it
they-
is.
Well, they've been saying it for 30 years that was the goal. But more importantly, there's this notion I think that's come around about like codedness. Like, is this concept or idea or ideology white or brown coded? And frankly, this is a reflection of people having anxieties about how white or brown they are. Like, as a unambiguously white person, I don't fear where I code, like how I code. Like,
Oh yeah, who
if
gives a fuck?
yeah, like I have no anxiety over this. Like when I read like a Che Guevara book, it's white because I'm a white man. Like I'm sorry, like I do things whitely.
Well, also, if I'm not mistaken, Che Guevara and Castro were extremely racist. They were extremely racist guys.
Well, homophobic, whatever. Yeah, but like even I don't even.
But here's the point that I'm driving at is that if you want to get into what is brown coded and what's white coded, Republican revolutionaries, that is white coded. That's European coded. That is what's defined Europe for the past 200 years, right? And before that as well. What is brown coded is like heavily corrupt, authoritarian, fucking what's brown coded is MAGA. Like, you have insider trading. You have pardoning of criminals who are your personal business associates. Like, that is what's brown coded. It is not Hezbollah.
Yeah, like the thing about the Trump admin at this point is like the level of corruption is at such a level that the African National Congress in South Africa would just look at that and like, what are we, a bunch of savages? Like, we don't do that kind of stuff.
Yeah. But that's what's brown. I mean, they're making policy where people inside the administration are betting on it getting struck down. And so they form the policy so it gets struck down. That is what the tariff fiasco was about. Lutnick was betting on it. So if you really want to talk about like specifically what's coded, what's brown coded is MAGA. What's brown coded is America. What's not brown coded are these revolutionaries fighting for their independence. Actually, that is how America was founded. That is what that is what defines modernity in the European century. And that's being embodied by not only Hezbollah, but also the Islamic Republic. The Islamic Republic was the continuation of the constitutional revolution of 1905, and you had white Americans going and fighting in that and dying. People don't know that part of history.
That is a very fun part of hidden history, is that there were like Americans who were so committed to this the tale of like republicanism and like revolution against reactionary powers that American like adventurers fought for the Constitutional Republic of Iran, which is one of those crazy incidents of history, which is actually also why Iran, until frankly like the revolution, was always very close, had very good relations with the United States. Like it was
kind of ruined Iran's. I won't say Iran's because the Shah was a dog of America, but like what ruined like Iranian public opinion on America was the cooing of Mossadegh. But before that happened, Iranians looked to America as like a guide.
Well, this is also the entire Middle East, Near East, like West Asia, like America and France were considered like the model states, and very famously, like the like foreign policy Arabism was the policy in 1948. Like the idea that America has always had like these like terrible like wars with Muslims is just, I mean, frankly, it's like Straussian like bullshit, like Clash of Civilizations bullshit. It's like
what's that guy's name? Samuel Huntington, like the Clash of Civilization nonsense.
Yeah, because there's not actual basis for that. Like you can read it that way, but it relies on some like very, very.
Well, no, because all the fucking Muslim, like, dude, you can go into like the Bush era. All the Muslim governments, besides Saddam Hussein, cooperated with us in our war on terror.
Yeah, it's always been like a very odd historical kind of thing.
It's the total bullshit. No, it's total bullshit. And
I mean, frankly, the traditional Catholic, and Christendom is like Western civilization. The traditional Catholic view of the Mohammedans is that
that's what they were.
Yeah, is that they're called Mohammedans.
They're Christian heretics.
And these guys who like were attacking us said, were you like use the phrase Mohammedan like as if it's like some kind of an insult. That's that word. The reason like Christians called them that was because we viewed them as fellow Christians who were just like heretically followed in the same way you would view Arians, like the Arian heresy or like whatever name.
I think a perfect analogy here are the Mormons.
Yeah, the Mormons. Like, yeah, it's like the traditional view of Islam was that, oh, it's just that, oh, that's Muhammad's heresy, but they're just Christians who've lost their way, just like every other like Christian has lost their way. You know, It's fine. Like, guys, like we like, I don't know.
And also, let's not act like there's no such thing as white Muslims. Like, who do you think Bosnia? What's Bosnia? What's Albania? And then these people try to do this cope that those guys aren't white because they're Muslim. Yeah. Well, then it's just like, well, whatever you mean by white is something different than like what everybody else means by it.
Yes. Well, this is what I say. Like, this is just like this scoundrel's whiteness, where you would say white, like, so like, because these people would always, you know, maintain that, like, oh, so you mean like whoever's white kind of, it depends on basically what are Israel's immediate interests at the time.
Yes.
You know, it's like, it's scoundrel's whiteness. It's invoked to, it's in, good.
Yeah. I mean, I think that like, this is kind of, it's reminding me of this whole Finkelstein controversy, because Finkelstein actually applies that kind of logic.
Real quick, Tink, because we can go into that really deep. I wanted to lay out one more thing before we kind of move off the patch. Is also there's frankly and I don't almost want to say this because it's mean. It is a red pilled yesterday, like self-seriousness of like somebody who got based in the last like 2-3 years is like, how dare you have a little fun with like these symbols and these ideologies? Like,
oh yeah,
it's just like that's.
Oh yeah, everyone forgets white jihad.
Yeah, like we were having fun. We have fun. Like this thing has always been about a certain level of fun. Get the fuck over it. Like, because somebody posted it in replies who was like, you don't understand. I view like these patches are a way to identify friend and foe on the battlefield. And like, dog, I didn't even reply. I was like, I'm sorry. Like, patches on the internet, they are not serious. Like, there is not like, they are all like, every patch is a meme patch. No one is like seriously doing friend or foe ID with. Like, I'm sorry, dude. Like,
well, there's two more things I do want to say before we get into the Finkelstein stuff. And there's two things. Number one, get your patch at Antelope Hill.
Oh,
right.
Also,
like,
if you're a Doomernet Substack subscriber, send Doomernet a Substack DM, and you will get a Antelope Hill like discount code to get it for free.
Yeah. Well, also we have our own code, right? Like EV5 or something. Like,
well, that's a discount code. This will be a code.
That's a discount code. Yes.
This will be like to give you a free patch.
Yes. But also, I do want to say one thing about the friend-enemy distinction that these guys tried to use, and it's totally fucking backwards. Like, they have no idea how to identify the friend-enemy distinction. Like, you think that people fighting in South Lebanon to stay in South Lebanon, fighting against the people that control your government, that is your enemy. You're a fucking idiot. And you think that, because they're Muslim? And then they try to justify that as like civilizational wars the West has gotten into with Muslims, like the Crusades. But it's like, if you think that somehow the Crusades are relevant in any type of modern political discourse, you're a fucking retard. Like, you are just a fucking stupid person. If you think that Muslims, specifically resistant groups that are Islamic, that is where you establish the friend-enemy distinction, you're a fucking idiot. Anyways, Tinkzor, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say that like what people haven't really picked up a lot of with the Finkelstein stuff is that he does this a very similar kind of border policing that you do see from like really unsophisticated rightoids, but like leftist border policing is somewhat different. But in Finkelstein's case, he is subtly like manipulating what the border of the acceptable is in order to really do like this sort of scoundrel like thing of like, what are the interests, not of Israel, but like of people like Normal Finkelstein, essentially. Like,
yeah, it's like the scoundrel's proletariat, right? What is truly
exactly.
What is truly left wing here is
because just to lay out the table for those who have been living under a rock or don't spend their day online, Normal Finkelstein, who is like this real luminary on the left. I mean, I looked up to him for decades, so like he was a personal hero of mine. And I would say in some sense he kind of still is, but like the problem with Finkelstein today is just that, putting aside the stuff we're about to cover, like this guy, like his era is over. Like he's still talking about like the bread, peace, and land, and like what the Bolsheviks, discussed in Siberia and whatever. And it's like, dude, like you might as well talk about the Guelphs and the Ghibellines at this point. Like it's
Well, I think
it's
something
over,
that
bro.
is relevant when it comes to this is I think Finkelstein has always had that role of he's always tried to define what is and what isn't acceptable to talk about. And I think one prime example is the Holocaust.
Yeah.
He did write a book called The Holocaust Industry, where he talked about how Jews used the Holocaust to extort European governments to make a lot of money, right? And also make up like he literally said, like Jews make up stories to write books about, and they make a lot of money off of it. And he also said that this is used to justify the state of Israel. And so, and this is important, Finkelstein wrote that to say you're getting too wild about the Holocaust.
Yes.
And you need to roll it back a little bit, because there are actual people who deny the Holocaust, and you cannot give them a justification to do that when you're doing everything that would suggest this actually is fake.
Yeah. I mean, Finkelstein is a much more advanced version of Noam Chomsky in that structural role, because for a while, if you were an idiot, you could say that, oh, wow, Chomsky, he's like the biggest radical ever. Like, wow, he's so radical. And then you kind of realize he's hanging out with Steve Bannon and Epstein. And these days, you don't hear a lot of people saying Chomsky, the great radical, anymore. Finkelstein is legitimately much more radical than Chomsky ever was. So the role of being like the cooling, like the moderating rod in the nuclear reactor here, like that was never really activated, because like his sort of, top speed or whatever was in general much higher than than like what you could actually do on the road. But after October 7th, that has really changed. And like with people,
one of the big landscapes of this that's underrated is after October 7th, the shift of which Palestinian voices or actual Palestinians in the West have credibility. So
exactly
pre October 7th, there was a lot of Palestinian academics, that tradition of Edward Said, who were very leftist, very involved in like the PFLP and the DFLP, all those very liberal presenting, talked about Christian Zionism a lot. They were definitely like the forefront. After October 7th, those people were all, frankly, like Mehdi Hassan even, all like purged. MSNBC, when I was October 7th, they fired every single Muslim host they had.
Yeah.
For no reason. They didn't even say why. All these universities, like the university like smash-down on anti-Zionism has destroyed and fired and gutted a lot of these people who, despite being actual true believers, like I don't think they were lying, but in their place has risen doctors, engineers, business people who are Palestinians who frankly don't give a shit. Like your Dr. Rama in England, who will go much harder. So Finkelstein has to now like play his role, because there was this other moderation thing of these, frankly, like of these Palestinian academics who would kind of keep this. Those people are all gone now. Now the alternative is Dr. Rama in England, who will talk to anybody, right?
Exactly.
And will also say it's a Jewish issue. Like that's something that's key.
He will invoke Jewish supremacy. Absolutely.
Like they will invoke the fact that because, for example, Finkelstein said that like Ben Shapiro is successful because of white supremacy.
Oh yeah, right? And he said the same thing about Jared Kushner. Like he got in to like this top university because of white male privilege and so on.
Right. And also, Finkelstein is a 76er. Like, he believes in a two-state solution. That is soft Zionism. Like, if you believe in a Jewish state in occupied territory, yeah, you are a Zionist. And in one way or another, holding to a two-state solution in my opinion, that is Nakba denial.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's,
and
that's J Street. That's like that's the whole. I mean, this is like we are seeing what's going to come in the next year is they're shaping up a new leftist position, which is going to be you can't have APAC money, you got to have J Street money. You can't be you have to be a two-state person. But
You got to be Mamdani. You got to be Mamdani.
Yes,
you got to have.
They're going to try to portray the J Street two-state solution as like some kind of radical, leftist true thing. But I think they might. I think they've already lost it. The cat is out the bag.
Well, one thing people don't, when it comes to the two-state thing, I mean, that technically is America's official position on the matter, right? Like before you had these radical Licudites get into power, like with Trump, like Jerusalem was not recognized as the capital. That's always been the official position, in words and technically on paper, is a two-state solution. Now, does America want to give Palestine statehood? Obviously not. Do they care about Palestinians? Obviously not. But the rhetoric was always, in some distant future, there would be a two-state solution. That was the official American position. And so when you start advocating for a two-state solution, that technically is like what the status quo policy is. Now, you might be more critical of Israel, and you might criticize AIPAC and stuff like that. Don't get it fucking twisted, though, right? There's nothing radical about that.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing.
You still believe in Jews occupying territory. You still believe that.
This will be unsuccessful, and we should let Tingsworth go because we've been cutting him off a bunch. I know you had a point, but you can always throw back that it's the George W. Bush position to be a two-stater, and that's always going to hit. Like,
yeah, and I think that like we've kind of laid out the sort of the background here, where it's important to establish that Finkelstein was in many ways like a real radical. And I mean, he's been radical about a lot of things. Like he had some sort of personal crisis of faith when Mao Zedong died, for example, because he was a super like radical Maoist back in the day. So like his leftist bona fides are almost impeccable, because he got into big trouble. And I think this was like the foreshock of what we're seeing today, when he basically almost denounced the BDS movement for reasons that weren't maybe like completely intellectually honest. But other than that, I mean, he sacrificed a lot, he suffered a lot. And like, this is a guy who genuinely cares. And he's not like, Finkelstein is not Mehdi Hassan. He is far more sophisticated than that. So if you go into his site today, you will see that like the latest update is not actually like the Finkelstein interview we're going to talk about, but he has updated it since with like drone footage of Hezbollah blowing up IDF soldiers and saying like, may God protect these brave warriors and so on. And that's not like cynical on his part. Like he is in many ways a true believer, but like the limitations of Finkelstein have become super obvious with this latest interview. And so to give like a basic rundown of it, he's interviewed by like a leftist where he basically says that like this entire turn where America is becoming more and more critical of Israel is deeply sinister and dangerous, and the left needs to fight back against it. And I'm going to lay out what Finkelstein's argument is here, because it's actually like, it's super telling. So Finkelstein initially makes the point, and this is like an a priori point, like it's going to be popular among leftoids, some leftoids, not all of them, but it's like the old like classic of, and this is like a chud point almost, where it's like, if you're a Christian or if you're on the right, you don't care about poor people. It is known. Therefore, mutatis mutandis, anyone who is a Christian or is on the right saying, oh gosh, golly gee, I don't think like killing children in incubators and, raping Palestinians with dogs, I don't think that's great. These people are, because they're on the right or because they're Christian, a priori incapable of thinking, like having human emotions almost. So if they say, oh, I don't want to support Palestinians getting raped by dogs, that this is not what they mean, because they can't mean that, because that would imply that they have some sort of compassion and people on the right don't have compassion. And you can see, like, this is you have the same thing on you talk about this a lot, like on Eviction Notice, how all of these narratives are deployed by like rightoids against, communists or whatever the fuck. Like, it's the same thing on the left. So this is like a really cheap argument, but he uses this really cheap argument like a sort of fake, formalistic logic.
Well, real quick though, it's not
Yeah.
even an argument. It's just giving an argument is too much credit. He is saying if you are a leftist, like this, he's pointing to the lowest common denominator of leftists, saying if you as a leftist, you have an idea of the right winger in your head as just like dream Hitler, like from the cartoons. Like I don't think Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens are capable of human compassion because they voted for Trump in 2016. Like that's that he's just invoking this. He's not actually making an argument. He's just doing an invocation here.
In my opinion, it's a much bigger deal what something like Marjorie Taylor Greene and what Tucker did. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene is like resigned from Congress. Like
exactly.
She and Tucker was fired from Fox News and lost. Like these people, like fundamentally altered, and with Marjorie Taylor Greene lost her career.
Yeah,
because of them opposing Israel.
But this is what Finkelstein has to do. He has to say that, like, logically speaking, yes, Tucker Carlson did all of these things. Yes, Marjorie Taylor Greene did all of these things, but they are on the right. And, we have this book here that says if you're on the right, you cannot have human emotions. And that is simply true, meaning that there must be some other reason they do these things. Like, there must be. It doesn't matter. Like, so the irony here is that he spends so much time like talking about like conspiracies, but like this is conspiratorial thinking. It's like, why did this happen?
It's very right wing.
Yeah, but like this is only like the setup, because he needs to establish that there is like a deep conspiracy here. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Village Crazy Lady, like what is that guy, like the bro podcast or whatever, who started crying about Palestinians?
Is it Theo Vaughn?
Yeah, Theo Vaughn.
I mean, frankly, we weren't on the list, but like Doomer is on the list, right?
Exactly. I mean, Doomer, like you, Lewis, like everyone, it's all part of like this conspiracy where you can't really trust what anyone's saying. You have to look at like the deeper like logic here.
Like we're gathering a mass movement to like kill all of the Jews for capitalism or something.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Like, because when he actually gets to the substantive criticism of the right of Tucker Carlson and why all of this is bad, he says that like what he fears, this is his actual argument. You have to defeat Tucker Carlson because Tucker Carlson might at some point in the future say that Jews have acted as and this is his choice of words, a fifth column. Like in the Spanish Civil War, you had 4 columns marching on Madrid, and then you had a 5th column inside of Madrid, sabotaging like the Spanish Republic. So he is afraid that Tucker Carlson or Marjorie Taylor Greene or anyone else will say, years from now, that American Jews have acted as a 5th column and gotten America into a war with Iran for interests that have nothing to do with Americans. And like Trump has betrayed what he said he would do and so on. Here's the thing. After saying this, Norman Finkelstein goes on and say, and this is correct, by the way, this is true. So I want to be extremely clear here. Norman Finkelstein is saying that he thinks that Jews have acted as a 5th column, that they have subverted the American political system, and that they have forced America to, or basically helped engineer a situation where, Americans get fucked at the gas pump and blah, 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 blah. So if he is not making the argument that Tucker will make something up. He's saying that Tucker will say something that is, and here I quote Finkelstein directly. Finkelstein says that what Tucker Carlson says is at least 60% true. And that is the tragedy. And he goes on to say that, like, okay, well, in general terms, like historically, anti-Semitism is basically irrational. And that is the thing about anti-Semitism. But in this particular case in America in 2026, anti-Semitism is actually rational. Resentment against Jews in America in 2026 has a rational core because Jews really are doing these things. And he describes the situation of the Jews. Again, I'm quoting him verbatim here. Jews in America were like Stalin during collectivization in Russia. Again, if you don't believe me, listen to the interview at around the 30-minute mark, and you will hear this coming out of the horse's mouth. Jews in America were dizzy with success. 2% of the population essentially, got to set the tone of public debate, and they could fire anyone who spoke up and so on. And they got so enamored with all their power that they have now pushed things too far. And so Tucker Carlson is dangerous because he has the power to just stand up and say, aren't we all kind of tired of this? Like, why are Jews doing this? Note. I want to point something out here that might have been missed here. At no point is he actually talking about the interests of the Palestinians here.
Mm-hmm.
So his argument is that Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Doomer Nat, and so on have to be defeated because they will, go onto their podcasts and say, we're basically sick of Jews acting as a fifth column. Again, to use Finkelstein's own terminology. And this has to stop. Like, America can't go on like this. And all their talk about, like, they don't like seeing Palestinians get raped by dogs and so on. And, like, Finkelstein concedes that Tucker does, like, actual work. Like, he interviews Palestinians, he interviews Christians in the Holy Land, and they're being horribly treated by the Israelis. And he says, yeah, this is true. Like, he is true. He is completely correct about this. This stuff goes on. But the problem here is that talking about the Palestinians is just like this setup in order to talk about, like, being tired of Paul Singer and so on. And to talk about being tired of Paul Singer, why is that dangerous? Well, it might blow over to, victimize innocent Jews in America. And, let's hand that to him. Like, it might, but this isn't really a discussion about Palestinian interests. Like, if Tucker Carlson frees Palestine because he wants to free Palestine just so he'll have a better setup to talk about Paul Singer in the US. Like, is it really in the interest of a Palestinian in Gaza to say, like, oh, sorry, well, I can't deal with...
This is what October 7th was all about. It was to get people like Tucker Carlson to become anti-Zionist. It was to get people like the average American, many of them who are right-wing, into becoming anti-Zionist. Leftists have always been critical of Israel. It was to get people like Finkelstein is trying to argue against to become anti-Israel. That was the whole point. And the liberation of Palestine and actually globalizing to intifada, that is not going to be in the interest of American Jews. It's not going to be.
To
and
invoke
you'll never
a
be
little
able
bit,
to make it.
Yes, to invoke Finkelstein's favorite chairman.
Sorry to interrupt, Zord.
Oh no. I was to invoke Chairman Mao. It was to make clear the primary contradiction, which is either you believe like America exists under Jewish, or America and the West exists under Jewish supremacy, or you don't, right? If you do believe that, then worrying about lefty, righty, and all these, or even like a million other political concerns, even immigration, like either your state is run by foreigners or it's not. And as Mao would make clear, it doesn't matter if those foreigners have a more like progressive state or a better whatever, if this is contradictory, your state has to rise up. And famously, Mao aligned with the bourgeois, warlords against the Japanese.
Yes, the only way the proletarian can be liberated is if the nation is liberated from foreign occupiers. Because primary and secondary contradictions.
Yes. On contradiction, if you want to read Mao, but and of course he knows this, right? But
yes, because Tingsburg enlightened us that Finkelstein was big into Mao. Mao's biggest contribution to Marx.
I've noticed that a lot of the naked Jewish supremacists, even Van Jones, people who become real, as you would call it, the most raped of the kike slaves, they have oddly Maoist origins. Van Jones was some kind of black power.
This is obvious. You know why, right? Because American Jews heavily supported Mao, and then most of those guys died because they were old or they were purged during the Cultural Revolution. And China became this pseudo-fascistic National Socialist state. And George Soros tried to destroy the yuan, and that didn't work. And then George Soros came out and said, China is the number one enemy of the open society. And that's when the Jews in America really started to hammer down on China. But to go back to Finkelstein and stuff, I mean, if we want to talk about a real conspiracy and real subversion that's happened, yeah, it is Jews in the pro-Palestinian movement.
And the issue here is just that Finkelstein himself is a Maoist. And I mean, he has this kind of, you could, if you wanted to, say kind of a blight disregard for, and here I'm starting to sound a chud or whatever, but the quote unquote victims of communism. And it's yes, I mean, if you ask Finkelstein, it's mistakes were made and there were some excesses, and sometimes you gotta break a few omelets or break a few eggs to make a hecking omelet. And okay, I'm fine with all of that. I mean, this is kind of my position as well as, a leftoid of some sort. I've been a card-carrying leftoid for, several decades. But the thing is, if we want to be super hardcore Maoists here and say that sometimes you gotta squeeze to get some juice or whatever the fuck, is the sacrifice of a couple of Jewish academics or whatever, if that is the risk, the danger. Tucker Carlson red pills a bunch of American rightoids and teenagers, millions of American teenagers that Palestinians are being oppressed. And he only does so cynically in order to settle some score with some Jewish college leftist professor or whatever. Isn't that just another egg to throw into the omelette? Why should that be a deal breaker?
Well, it's very much downstream of the Jewish feelings discourse and the left who are the Gentile left has gotten pretty good as actually just whenever you see a Jew talking about Jewish feelings on the left, you just make fun of them for this.
Yeah.
But it is a question that I think the left needs to grapple with, is that how many Jews in America are you willing to make scared to free Palestine? Because and that answer is objectively not zero. Even the most ardent leftists will say, well, theoretically you could scare a couple if the non-scaredness of a couple neurotic Jews is not worth any amount of human life, right? So once you put it on this ground, it gets very uncomfortable for the left.
Yeah, it's impossible to liberate Palestine without pointing out the fact that Jews dominate American foreign policy. You can't separate those two fucking things.
And also that Israel is a Jewish state. Once again, Muhammad al-Kurd, who was one of these few, because he wasn't an academic. Muhammad al-Kurd is a displaced, or whatever the phrasing is. He is a Palestinian living in Jerusalem. He is by intentional genocidal policy. He is born in what the Israeli state claims as its sovereign territory, and is not granted citizenship, despite being in Jerusalem, anyway. So he is not a citizen of Israel. But even though he lives inside of it, and he has always been a kind of a activist in jail for the last eight years. Always been relatively peaceful, but he famously, never decried this. His sister is also a big activist, and he wrote an article recently came out today about it was basically called like "They're Jewish," like you can't. He said basically we always learned like as because they Palestinians do train activists because they were being trained by these leftists that you can't ever call them Jews. Like as soon as you call them Jews, like they're going to like fixate on that, and yes, they can like kill you and bomb you and shoot you, but like calling them or invoking a trope is worse. And
if the Jew can call you Amalek, why can't you call him a Jew?
Yes, and the thing is, Muhammad al-Kurd, it was massively well received. Like everyone, the whole left embraced this. They love it, and it's going. And that's because al-Kurd he's because he is like on the ground on the front lines of this thing. He doesn't have this kind of Edward Saadian need for approval from figures like Finkelstein or Chomsky or Foucault at the time. Very famously, Foucault like failed to kind of endorse the proto first Intifada stuff, and like Edward Said wrote an article about how wounded how like devastated he was that his biggest idol had kind of like refused to endorse like Palestinian nationalism based on like gay ass women's rights shit too. It was really
One thing the left, in my opinion, is going to have to grapple with is that they've been wrong on this issue since it's been an issue, and they're starting to grapple with it, but you can't, because the whole leftist line has been that Jews also are hurt by Zionism, and Zionism is a white supremacist, like Anglo-American imperial project, and they've been wrong. Like this is just wrong, and you're starting to see how inadequate that analysis is when looking at the current state of things.
Yeah. I kind of feel a bit of pity for Finkelstein, because I mean he is getting so old and so slow. Like anyone who has a sort of critical eye, if you follow along his argument, he's not actually going the extra mile, which he would have done 15 years ago. Like 15 years ago, he would have essentially have made the argument if he was interviewed on the same topic, under the same conditions. But basically, Tucker Carlson is a Pied Piper, and he will lead you to your doom because he will harm Palestinians.
Yes.
But today, and he would make some sort of cockamamie argument about if you harm, if you inconvenience American Jews, that will buy some Rube Goldberg Tom and Jerry trap device, whatever. It will in the fifth order of effect, it will actually redound on the Palestinians. So Jews are like the canary in the coal mine or whatever.
But the best part of this though is that you can just they're so easy to short circuit. It's you can just, if you allow a response to be made, and right now the left is not very good or the Jewish left is not very good at controlling absolute dominance. So the obvious response is to if you make American Jews scared, that hurts the Palestinians. The response is, why are you hurting Palestinians?
Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing. It's the same argument as Hamas is bad for the Palestinians or Hezbollah is bad for Lebanon. It's the same thing.
But just to finish the point here, he's so old and slow in the Big 26, as you Zoomers like to say, that he's not making that argument. I want to be super clear about that. He's not saying Tucker Carlson is bad because he will eventually harm Palestinians. He skips over that, which is kind of what you need to do as a leftist, really. If you don't want to leave a bunch of chinks in your armor. But he just says Tucker Carlson is bad because he will essentially potentially harm American Jews, because he will give voice to something which I, Norman Finkelstein, acknowledge is completely rational and mostly true. I mean, where he really gets sort of disingenuous is where it's talking about whether Israel controls the United States or not. And here he's not really being at his best. I mean, in some cases, Finkelstein is like a brilliant academic, like incisive, in mastery of the facts and so on.
His books are
So,
great.
yeah, so you can really tell when he like switches over to this like slow of learning, slow of hearing, like doddering old boomer. Like, I don't understand that, like, because it's so obvious in this case. Like he's saying, he says stuff like, "There's no evidence for Israel controlling the United States," and I'm like, really, dude? Really, no evidence. Marco Rubio went out and said that, like, we did it because of Israel. Like, the lawyers at the State Department are basically justifying this as a collective self-defense of Israel. So, I mean, there's evidence. And then later on in the interview, I think he's like called on it, and he says, well, what I said was, it's not true. But that's not the same thing as there being no evidence. And it's like, okay, really, dude? Like he is grasping here because, again, he kind of carries his heart on his sleeve here. Like he has a position which he lays out completely honestly, which is there is a reckoning coming for American Jews because American Jews have kind of screwed themselves being dizzy from success like Joe Stalin during collectivization. And we have to defeat these rhidoids in order to prevent that. And it's like, yeah, okay, fine. I mean, you're relying on all of these. Like, I don't think someone like Mel, like Village Crazy Lady, is an uncaring golem. Like, this is kind of the leftist resentment towards Christianity, which, certain other groups also have a huge resentment against Christianity as well, like spoiler alert. But like I don't really buy into these stereotypes like I used to, but I'm sorry, I'm not gonna be a good old foot soldier for that sort of dehumanization, like fucking partisan slop, where it's like,
Right.
okay, well, someone who says, I'm going to start a charity in order to prevent more Palestinian kids from dying. Oh, well, you're a Christian. Fuck you. Like, no, sorry. Like, if the Pope says this is bad, I'm going to try to help. I'm going to say thank you.
Good
like,
for the Pope.
That is great.
And were you done making your point?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I really think Finkelstein is the last of like a dead movement or like the prototypical anti-Zionist Jew that is like dead. Like it just is. He is one of the last of a remaining old guard, because most Jews who were anti-Zionists and liberal have just jumped the ship. They just have become rightoids.
Yeah.
They did fund the Donald Trump campaign in 2024. They do support Israel having a right to defend itself. That's they support that. And it was a huge there were tons of Jews that said when October 7th happened, it was like I got hit with cold water. And a lot of them started saying that we saw that people, because Jews did support BLM, and if BLM ever happens again, they're going to support it again. And they felt betrayed, and so they got on the right wing. A prime example of this is actually Jonathan Greenblatt. Jonathan Greenblatt worked with the Biden administration to crack down on white supremacy. October 7th happens. There's a leaked phone call of him saying that we have a youth problem, we have a TikTok problem, we have a left-wing problem. And now he's working with the Donald Trump administration, trying to get foreign students who are participating in pro-Palestinian protests deported. So, Finkelstein is kind of this old guard, this old state of things that doesn't really exist anymore. I mean, Jewish Voices for Peace.
Really quickly, though, it's also, frankly, about the decline of like the Jewish IQ and intellectual ability as they've gotten more success. No, it's really a regression, because
regression to the Hebe.
Yes, the regression to the Hebe, as we made the joke. The idea that you're having problems with the left, therefore you need to give money to the Republican Party and become Republicans, is that's not actually like the best way to control things, right? The way you would
That's
control,
what they did.
but like what they should have done was what they did during. So if you remember, this is kind of a deep cut. In the Vietnam War movement, anti-Vietnam, there was a big split over the over like basically the series of the 78, 76, 7, all the 6-7 war, Yom Kippur, all these conflicts happened at the same as the Vietnam War, and there was a big split against like Gentiles who were principally anti-war and leftist often versus like all these Jews who came out for Israel, and this divided the movement, quote unquote. But those Jews that support Israel, they didn't like become Republican Party people. That was a very niche thing of like neoconservatism. Like a lot of them just stayed as Democrats. Like the establishmentization worked on both ends, but you're not like there's no one coming in behind Finkelstein. There's a couple like frankly like the couple younger truly anti-Zionist Jews that you can maybe find on like Twitter here or there are often like anons or they're frankly just not like barely not even they're not even really Jewish. Like it's like some American like comedian who's 100% Americanized. It's basically like not like they're so set out of it. Like it's almost not credible that they would even invoke Judaism. Like the only ones I can think of are like the Chapo Trap House guys, but they're not. They're like they don't. They're not holding anything in reserve. Like I truly think some of those guys don't truly like identify as Jews over white.
Well,
like,
one person that pops into my mind is Blumenthal.
Yeah, Blumenthal is like okay, like is he like he invokes the Judaism thing, but like
Blumenthal is not a good inheritor of Finkelstein because he was one of the guys being like most vehement in his criticism of Finkelstein.
Blumenthal is like a Jew that like I do have to show some of my respect for. Like I do. Like
here's the kind of kicker though. I mean, he's like I'm not Borso, so I don't have this information like fucking like Dune living computer, but like I think it's like 1/8 or 1/4 or whatever.
Yeah, that's what I assume too.
I believe
he's
it's
not
1/8,
actually
yes.
that Jewish.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing is like the Jewishness of them is like enough that they could just start identifying as.
Yeah, they're like Finn Bloods in Vampire the Masquerade.
One thing that did piss me off that Blumenthal did though, I remember, is he did a documentary about Jews in Iran and how like they're treated very well. And how like it's not, he was trying to do like the anti-Zionist, anti-Semitism distinction and like showing that like these anti-Zionist countries have like a thriving Jewish community. And the problem with that is it's like, well, what happens if they were actually anti-Semitic? Then what? Why? And this is something all anti-Zionist Jews do. Like they don't, almost none of them back off on it, no matter how radical they get, is they will still police you about anti-Semitism. Yeah. So the thing is, most leftists will do that.
Yeah, what's funny because you remind me of a very Gentile movement that doesn't do this and is actually quite exemplary. Is the Marxist homosexual movement, like your Queers for Palestine? Like seriously, got to give them their props. They will be asked like, well, they kill like they kill queers in Gaza, and they're like, yep, I support them anyway. There was that girl goes like, or girl, I mean, who knows? They were asked by I think one of these. I might have been Hermes, that guy on Twitter actually.
It was Hermes did this one time.
Yeah, he goes to this. He goes up today and says like, if you were in Gaza, they would kill you. And she said something like, yeah, and they shouldn't be killed for that. Like it's okay to be basically. I'm willing to sacrifice my identity here, and that's the right answer to this. But like, is that shit? They're shit testing you,
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is, I mean,
before you go, Tingsorg, I just want to let everyone know that where's my phone? New IDF casualty by Hezbollah just dropped.
Damn.
They got another one. Look at this one. So they're really frying burgers over there, just to be clear for everybody. Anyways,
I
just wanted to point that out. Like, fat Jew got BTFO'd by Hezbollah. Anyways, go ahead, Tingsorg.
Yeah, rest in pepperonis, I guess. But like the thing about what you said, Lewis, here, I mean, the recent news is that like the Pride Parade in like I think it was in Rome or Milano, whatever, one of the big Italian cities, like everyone was invited except for the Israelis because they had some sort of Jewish. It wasn't Israelis. It was like Jewish Italian queers, and they were banned because they didn't denounce Israel, and like everyone who wanted to participate in like the Pride parade
Good for the
had
homos.
to say, yeah, like so. But the thing here about someone like Max Blumenthal, I mean, he was supposed to be the future of like this entire sort of intellectual milieu, and like he has this book, I think it's like Leviathan,
Goliath.
and he Goliath, exactly, and he was incredibly blue-pilled when he started writing that.
Yes.
And then he sort of traveled to Israel and like, these people are fucking crazy. What the fuck?
Everyone
So, I mean-
should read that book, by the way. Like,
Yeah.
Just to echo what you were saying, the point of the book was so he could say that the problem with Israel is this right-wing government, and it is a Netanyahu thing, and it is like a radical thing, and the people in Israel do not support this. And he went and interviewed like the left wing of Israel and the average Israeli citizen. And like he quickly found out that like, no, they all are genocidal maniacs. Like the trade union leaders who go on strike to do workers' rights in Israel, they are genocidal maniacs.
Yeah. And so I think that like his wife is also like super Anya Parampil or whatever her name is. Like she's also kind of like quote unquote red pilled. So like all of these people, like there is no, as you said, Lewis, there is no new generation of these academics coming in. One, because like Paul Singer and like Miriam Adelson and Bill Ackman just smashed like the natural habitat. Like they drained the marshlands that these people live in. Like there is no fucking like academia where you can sort of have your little like political base.
But yeah, not only that, like they basically killed every like Edward Said up and coming, and they also killed every like Finkelstein, I guess Finkelstein. Also, the milieu that made Finkelstein, like Finkelstein, I don't want to underrate how much he personally gave up. If you watch the documentary Defamation, which is about him, like he's a professor at some really shitty college. He makes like $0. He has a very small 1-bedroom apartment. Like I don't think he owns a car, and like not because he lives in a city that you don't need to own a car in. You know, like he's like puts up with a vast amount of personal privation.
Yeah,
you're not getting another one of those guys. Like they don't.
Yeah,
you have to like make them consciously.
Yeah, and
the milieu he grew up in was like this Trotskyite, Jewish milieu in New York. I'm pretty sure that's where Finkelstein comes from.
And now those guys are all like Tabadniks, and they're retarded.
Yeah, those guys are all Republicans now. That doesn't exist. Like the second generation Holocaust survivor of descendants of like members of the CPUSA, that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Like so for structural reasons, I mean, higher education is kind of going to the dogs anyway. Like there are less kids being born, blah 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 blah. We don't have to go into that. But then specifically, all of the people needed to support this intellectual world were just hunted to extinction, or they crossed the picket line after October 7th. So like he is kind of like the last of the Mohicans. But he is, I think that the reaction inside the left was very telling, because I mean, you had a bunch of people trying to defend him with like the old sort of nostrums. And I mean, I've debated some of them, and they basically fall into this sort of, oh, well, communists aren't human, except like from the left.
Right.
But like, talking to some random, giving me all of those arguments, and then me just saying like, okay, well, Finkelstein, if you follow what he's saying, he is trying to smuggle in the interests of American Jews. And like I can follow along in Finkelstein's argument. I don't think his arguments are wrong, in the sense that like at least 60% of what Tucker Carlson says is true. Yeah, sure, I agree. I think that like, there's 40% it's like aliens or whatever the fuck, demons. Like I'm not really sure about that part, but like the 60%,
demon scratched him in his sleep.
Yeah, exactly. Like that. Yeah, I'm not sure that's true. I mean, maybe, who knows? But like, other than that, sure, Finkelstein, I agree. I also agree that, like, at some point, someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene or like Thomas Massey is going to say, like, we can't have people, like, we can't have Israel controlling the United States.
Well, I want
That's
to
going
make
to
a
happen.
point. I want to make a point, which is leftists tried to argue with me about what I said about Finkelstein's interview, which is like, yeah, he's obviously trying to gatekeep. He's trying to preserve Jewish interests here. And they tried to argue with me saying that, well, right-wingers, even if they don't like Israel, are like still warmongering imperialists. Like, look how they reacted with Venezuela. And I said, yeah, well, so are left-wingers. And the evidence of this is Ukraine. The evidence of this is Syria.
Yeah.
If you can easily convince leftists to get on board with American imperialism. It's not that hard. If you frame, for example, you brought up Massey and Green. There was a bill. I don't even know how many years ago it was, but it was more sanctions on Syria. The only two people who voted against it was Massey, and I believe the other one was Marjorie Taylor Greene. AOC and like liberals, like the people who Democratic Socialists of America, what is it, DSUSA or the Dem Sox? I forget whatever acronym they are, but the Dem Sox. Yeah, those guys are liberal Zionists. Those guys get on board with American imperialism. Liberals do that shit all the time. This isn't like a left-right-wing issue. There are plenty of liberals and leftists who get on board with the American empire and get gay-opted by American imperialism. That is just a thing that happens. The left is almost infamously known for being the vanguard of American imperialism. Yeah. They are the guys who go out and say how
human rights.
Yeah, human rights. That's who the neocons come from. The neocons come from liberals who just observed that they can't win with the Democrats anymore, so they became Republicans. But the shit about caring about democracy, caring about gay rights in Uganda, that shit never left. Never left.
And like at this point, like my personal ethics here is just like, I would like Palestinians to stop being raped by dogs, ran over by bulldozers, incinerated by white phosphorus bombs. Like, that is what I'm kind of interested in. And right. So, I mean, if you Doomer says, like, I also think this is bad and I think this should stop. And some leftist says, well, Doomer he's like a racist. I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. I mean, he can call me a nigger then, whatever. Like, if that's the price, like if you put that to a Palestinian,
is like how many times? Okay, like it's like the AI when you're trying to trick ChatGPT into saying the N-word. How many times would you be willing to be called the N-word to free Palestine?
Yeah, like if I asked a Palestinian, like, would you be willing to like be freed from this genocidal tyranny, but the price is Doomer calls Tingsor a nigger? Like, what the fuck do you expect them to say? Oh no, sorry, like, I have standards. Like, I'll never cross that bridge, Comrade Malcolm. Like, what the fuck? Like, just
say the N-word.
Yeah, just whatever. Like, we can figure out like
dude. The left has lost the plot on many instances.
I would like to thank Yahya Sinwar for giving Doomer the N-word pass.
Yeah, I said that at the beginning of this conversation, and I think that's like what it is. It's like the reason why October 7th happened is so people like me and others like me become pro-Palestine. The left has always been nominally pro-Palestine. They've always been the ones who go to the rally. Right? There's no reason to convince them otherwise. Yeah, what happened, the reason is so the average American who is conservative becomes anti-Israel. That was the purpose. And people generally, I promise you, Palestinians don't give a fuck about why they are or how they are.
An Umfi actually made a really trenchant post about this, what we're talking about here, that I kind of had to sit back and sort of marvel at, because it's so precise in how it like illuminates the problem of someone like Norman Finkelstein, like the tragedy of Norman Finkelstein. Let's see if I can find it so I can sort of quote it verbatim here. Let's see. Give me a second. Okay, here it is. Quote, "It was always a bit silly to demand anti-Zionism without any anti-Semitism. Nobody on the left applies such, quote, moral hygiene, end quote, when celebrating the Haitian slave rising against the whites, for example." This is incredibly sort of like it hits, as the Zoomers say. Because if you think about Finkelstein, his entire life's work has been inside this kind of moral universe, like the sort of John Brown and Harper's Ferry, the Haitian slave uprising.
Nat Turner, something he always references.
Yeah, Nat Turner, but like the Bolshevik Revolution and all of that stuff, like Slavoj Žižek, like talking about divine violence, Walter Benjamin. It's like this is the core of this entire like intellectual world, where yes, okay, like objectively speaking, what the Haitians did against the French was incredibly, like, it was evil and it was self-destructive, like it fucked them over really badly. But also, like, what the hell did you expect after the French tried to re-enslave them? Like, but here we have the same, here the actual Haitian revolution breaks out. And you're called up to say, well, okay, these are my principles. And normal Finkelstein can't do it if it's about American Jews. He's okay with, like, saying, well, French people, sorry, omelette, you got to break some eggs. The victims of John Brown or whatever, sorry, an omelette had to be made. There were some eggs in the way. Same with, kulaks or the whites in Russia or, the people who died during the... Yeah, like everyone. Like, because this is the logic of the political project. Like emancipation, you can't really... A revolution is not a tea party.
We will make no excuses for the terror, but don't you dare scare one Jew.
Yeah, like that his own ideology cannot, like, it's dying because it has reached the end of, like, I mean, Finkelstein himself doesn't really believe in it anymore, because if he did, he would simply say, well, I guess it's our turn. But he can't say that, and so he has to do this thing in where it's like, oh no, I'm not trying to gatekeep, I'm trying to be like a good anti-fascist or whatever, but it's like, I'm trying to help the Palestinians. But he's not really even pretending to help the Palestinians, because he doesn't come up with like a good enough lie. He just says openly, we need to stop this before it hurts American Jews. And that is really sad in a way, because it kind of, like, at the end of his life, he's sort of betraying himself.
Well, that's what all these Jews. That's what all these Jews end up doing, though. Let's be. I do want to make that point. All these Jews end up doing that. Like, it happened on the right wing, right? What's that guy's name? Who's the big Jew paleocon, Lewis?
There's not at all.
No, but the one in like Pat Buchanan's circle, dude.
Spencer's guy who like brought Richard Spencer.
Yeah, Tink Zorg, help me out here.
Godfrey.
I can't remember.
Godfrey, Paul Godfrey. Yeah, Paul Godfrey did the same thing and endorsed the war on Iran.
Right. Yeah, he did.
Well, I want to say
always do
with Finkelstein, though. With Finkelstein, it is more tragic, and that's what Tink Zorg's getting at, is because unlike the rest of like the called like the capos, if you will, these kind of Jewish policemen that police American like intellectual and Western intellectual discourse in the Anglosphere, Finkelstein did give up a lot. He's
burned like a billion bridges.
He is an admirable person in a lot of ways, in that he was a self-sacrificing person. And when it finally came down to like, because it does take a certain amount of heroic thing. I think people underestimate the like leftist heroic soul a little bit, where it's like it takes something to be a white person and like be anti-white. right? Like there is something like yes, I don't like it as a white person.
There's nothing heroic about that.
No, but there is absolutely self-sacrificing like nature of it, and it's normalized. It's relatively common because it's normalized. But you would assume Finkelstein would have the ability to do the Jewish equivalent, and I think that was assumed that Finkelstein wouldn't put like American Jews over the freedom Palestinians, and he didn't, and that's what's disappointing. I think no one assumed he would break this way. Like if you would have told me this 5 years ago, I would have been like, yeah, that BDS thing was weird, but I thought he had like a principle. He had like some principled, because he did kind of like, so there was mask covering there, but this being so like blatant that like you can't scare one Jew.
Well, I'll tell you, I hold Jews up to one standard when it comes to anti-Zionist Jew, and it's Gilad Atzmon or Atzmon. That's that's the standard, right? Atzmon wrote a whole article called "The Jewish Solidarity Spin," and he's done almost like he does pro-Palestinian activism, but he specifically goes after Jews like Finkelstein, and that's the standard.
He gets no media ever. He's totally iced out. Like more anti-Semites know about Gilad Atzmon than Jews probably.
I understand that, but that's the standard I hold him to. Or it's someone like Israel Shahak, right, who writes about how Judaism plays a role in Israel, and that explains why they're so brutal and evil. Like, that's the standard I hold Jews to. I don't hold them to the standard of being ideological leftists, because inevitably, I'm sorry, they do end up like Finkelstein. They do end up like Chomsky. Nationalist, isolationist Jews like Godfrey end up the same way, where they end up endorsing Jewish supremacy when they actually feel threatened. Yeah, and so if you're not willing to say, and this is the question I pose to leftists when this question comes up about anti-Semitism, which is, what do you think the funny meme, what do you think globalize, what do you think the Intifada meant? Did you think it meant essays and vibes and What do you think globalize the Intifada means? What do you think that means?
Yeah, I mean, that is also kind of funny, where he sort of degenerates to this kind of like boomer who's unwilling to learn, where it's like, okay, but back in my day we had like these real slogans like bread, peace, and land. And the Bolsheviks, like, I grew up in this mythology, so like this is like Groundhog Day hearing all of this talk. I used to talk this way myself like 10 years ago, and it just feels so dreary now. It's like, get with the times at some point. Like things change. But like he has this whole spiel. But like, globalize the Intifada, if we're being completely honest, that is not a stupid goddamn like slogan. Like, sort of clean out your ears and actually listen here, boomer. Like, adjust your hearing aid, because globalize the Intifada, like Greta Thunberg knows what that means. Sankta Greta, like, she knows what globalized Intifada means. It means destroying like Israeli defense company equipment and messing up their clean rooms in Britain. It means denying sort of these Jewish pride organizations like the ability to partake in pride if they won't denounce settler colonial violence. It means like the ship to Gaza. It means boycotting, like, it means sailors or sort of dock workers in Italy refusing to load ships bound for Israel. Like, that is what globalized Intifada means, and it's fucking working. And he's like,
that bounds to mean anti-Semitism, because almost every one of these companies or firms that you want to boycott, a lot of them are owned by Jews, or a lot of them have Jewish shareholders, and so you can't be scared of that, dude. It's just, you cannot endorse the resistance wholeheartedly if you're scared of actually being anti-Semitic. I don't mean being accused of being anti-Semitic, because Jews are going to call you anti-Semitic regardless. These liberal Zionists get called anti-Semitic all the time. People like Mehdi Hassan get called anti-Semitic all the time. I mean, actually, functionally being anti-Semitic. Are you going to denounce Ansar Allah, which is the Houthis for Westerners watching, for saying curse upon the Jews? Are you going to condemn Hamas for denying the Holocaust and refusing to let people teach Palestinian children about the Holocaust? Are you going to condemn this?
Yeah, and
If
this
you are, then you can't be down fully with the resistance. I'm sorry, but you can't, because you're condemning it.
and this is also kind of like the funny thing, like the real sort of like schizophrenia inducing part of this entire like meta debate, where it's like, by all sort of conventional standards, Normal Finkelstein himself is quote unquote anti-Semitic, because like he concedes the argument. He basically, like, if you want to get a pretty big a pretty accurate summary of like Jewish power in the United States, you can just ask Normal Finkelstein. He will explain it to you, like he does in the interview. He talks about like all of these sort of like political structures, like the money wielded, like the way like Jews have controlled like the debate and so on, and how they've used this for like super parochial, like sort of to further their own ethnic group. And now this has caused so much trouble that, you know, in the common internet trope, the goyim know. Like he
well, how is
doesn't.
what Finkelstein's doing there when he says that like Tucker Carlson's right 60% of the things that he says? How is that different from him? But he still should be attacked, and what he's doing is sinister. How is that any different from like AIPAC leaders openly saying that like they defeated Thomas Massie? Like, how is that any different?
It's not, but like that is kind of the tragedy. So like he is trying to stop this, but even so, he's not even interested in saying like these are just fantasies. He's saying it's true, and people are mad about it, but we have to stop them before they get mad about it and like do something about it, because like that will lead to excesses. But he comes from a sort of political background where, you know, you literally cannot make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. Like that is the ethos of Trotskyism, I'm sorry to say. So like, if you admit that there's an omelet that needs to be made here, and you say, well, you know, sorry, like it will lead to broken eggs, like you have lost the plot at some point. But what I find really interesting here, though, is, I mean, the reactions to this Finkelstein thing. I saw Brianna Joy Gray quote tweet like that thing and link to one of her own interviews. And Brianna John Gray is kind of a bit like, she is sort of a Bernie bro generation, like with the chapos and so on. She's like a millennial leftist like me. A bit more bourgeois though, but I mean, like she's part of my tribe, I suppose,
if you will.
Yeah, exactly. Like, but I mean, these are the people I kind of quote unquote grew up with in a sense. But her reaction was so fascinating because she just linked to an interview she did where, I mean, they didn't really like angrily disagree, but they kind of sort of disagreed at the margins. And she said, well, okay, I'm going to link to this interview now that like Finkelstein is in the middle of a controversy again, and people can form their own opinions. And it's like, if you know the Kremlinology here, this is kind of significant because she's not even saying, yeah, I stand up for Normal Finkelstein. And she's not saying like he's bad, but she isn't. And this would be like any champagne socialist worthy of their salt. If this was 10 years ago, my God, if you didn't take this opportunity to just denounce like anti-Semitism and blah, 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 like that was unthinkable. But now it's like, let 1,000 flowers bloom and everyone can form their own opinion. So, I mean, things are really, really changing.
Yes, well,
because
when you I want to come back to the slogan of globalize the intifada, because what it really means, it like okay, yes, obviously, every country on earth, but it also has the of like universal. basically it's a call to like universalize and end the Jewish exception, right? In every country there's an exception made for Jews specifically to every kind of leftist or liberal position. Like they get their own ethnic police forces in London and in LA and New York. They get a lot of special privileges, and it's a call to the end of Jewish privileges, which also is implicit with it, like recognizing that exists. And both those things are very dangerous.
Yeah, and like my own view here is just that like I'm not gonna try to red pill you two guys on Trotskyism or whatever the fuck. Like I think that I don't have faith in in like the viability of these like old sort of moldy leftist, like Marxism itself is kind of it's a doctrine for a time of like rapid industrialization, but like in a period of rapid deindustrialization all across the world and like resource constraints and so on, it's kind of like it's no longer of the time. So I'm not really trying to sell you to Zoomers on anything, but even like being just sort of objective here, if I was, like, why would I really complain about the fact that you two are quote unquote woke on Palestine? Like, if I were some sort of real Trotskyist worth his salt, I would just try to like slip you a new newspaper or whatever after this podcast was done, because like that is at least going halfway to like the pure land of leftism or whatever. But the tragedy again of Finkelstein and like the sort of dead enders is that they really like they are the last of the Mohicans. There is no way for them to propagate their ideology because it's dead on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
And now that like the Palestine issue, like Hamas, they fucking succeeded. Yahya Sinwar is not just a hero. He is one of the greatest, like, great men of history.
Oh, yeah.
In the last 4 centuries. Like, his plan, as audacious as it was, has actually succeeded. He did make Palestine an issue even for the right, even for normies, even for Christians in America. And at that point, like, this is moving far outside of the control of these kinds of people. I mean, Finkelstein is so out of touch that he basically says that Mehdi Hassan is the only person on, not even on the left, but like left adjacent, who has a podcast of any sort of worth. And it's like, bro, what the fuck are you talking about?
Well, Mehdi Hassan, I'm an expert on this topic, right?
Yeah.
Mehdi Hassan is just he is a grifter, especially what he's doing now. Because what he's doing now, I think Lewis said it earlier, he was part of the group of Muslims that were all fired from MSNBC for having like slight pro-Palestinian sentiment. And what he's doing now is simply trying to get back in the good graces of the liberal Jewish establishment. That's what he's trying to do. That is why he brings on Iranian officials and questions them about 45,000 protesters dying in a couple of days. Like, dude, we all know that's bullshit. Why are you talking about this? Why are you talking about free speech in Iran? They're getting fucking bombed. Why are you talking about this? Why are you trying to make the Israel stuff a partisan issue? That's the crux of it. Why do you want to make it a partisan issue? You should be happy that more and more people are calling out the genocide of Palestinians. If they're wrong on a couple issues, okay, we'll deal with that later. The most important question, topic of the decade, of the century, is the genocide of the Palestinians. And I'm willing to, shake hands across the line on this issue. If you're not, you need to, there's some questions you need to ask yourself. Because I think all of you fuckers are wrong about a bunch of other stuff too. That doesn't bother me though. I know I'll never politically achieve what I want to achieve if Zog is not destroyed. And the only way Zog can be destroyed is the liberation of Jerusalem and the liberation of the Palestinian people. That's the only way it can be. So if you're willing to put that on a back burner and argue with the rightoids about other stuff who are pro-Palestine because you want to be a chud or something, you fundamentally misunderstand politics, and in Finkelstein's case, you're just a Jew. So that's that on that. I do want to talk about, if we could change gears a little bit. How much time do you have, Tingsword? Are you good?
I don't really have.
We usually go for about an hour, but since we've been gone for so long and there's a bunch of stuff to cover, we'll go more than that. We're already at 90 minutes. One thing I want to discuss is there was this Nazi anti-immigration protest in Ukraine. Did you see this?
Yeah, somewhat. Yeah.
Well, one thing there was some stuff there was just some Ukraine stuff on the timeline, and a video went super viral of this fag and his gay boyfriend who's Chinese, or I don't know what type of Asian he was, actually. I shouldn't say Chinese. Harassing this older man wearing a Soviet Union shirt, screaming, patriotic Ukrainian stuff, right? And I quote tweeted and I said that the political schizophrenia of Ukraine is something that almost no one can comprehend. And I attached an image of two fucking Ukrainoids, one holding the swastika with that's blue and yellow, and the other one holding an Israeli flag, right? And everyone was like, actually, this is perfectly understandable because the Zionists are Nazis, right? And I was like, no, that's not why it's understandable. The reason why you understand this is because Israel and the West bankrolled Azov and the Ukraine far right. Like, that's why it's understandable, is that the Jews have used these essentially neo-Nazis as armed defensive Zog. Right, that's what's understandable. But I constantly see people try to make out the Zionists to be Nazis, and that goes along with this left-wing critique of Zionism. And I do just want to point out that the Zionists are Jews, and the Nazis were kind of defined as not liking the Jews. And I don't like the redefining all of evil as Nazism.
Yeah. I mean, this is kind of like the funny thing about the ideological incoherence of the time we live in today is essentially that we've created this, and I wrote an essay about this in American Affairs called like The Rise and Fall of Nuremberg Christianity.
Precisely.
But that is still the case. Like, we have this sort of state religion, state ideology, and it says that basically, like, the original sin of man, like our Peloponnesian War, our crucifixion, and everything in between, like, that was the Holocaust, which is also kind of why, like, you understand why people want to do like Holocaust denial, where it's like, I'm gonna show them that this is like factually untrue, but even if you do, that's like showing a medieval peasant or whatever that like someone actually made this, fabricated this like nail of the true cross or whatever. And like, if you go back and you study how medieval people thought about like these sacred relics, they basically said openly that like, if you make a fake cross or a splinter of the cross, and you really like put your heart into it, like, that fake cross is transubstantiated into like the real thing. So they had a much more like, they weren't fools. Like, they had a fairly flexible and nuanced view of these things, which is also why you see today people basically think that there is like a spiritual Holocaust, which is like the real one, and then there are like echoes of it in material reality.
Yeah.
And so like even if the gas chambers like couldn't work or whatever, and like they made most of that up, like even if you prove that, like if God himself comes down from like splits the clouds and comes down and says, sorry, I'm God, I checked it, and like these people weren't gassed at like Sachsenhausen or whatever, people just say like, go away. Like we know this is true even if it's like factually untrue, so like what are you doing here? You can't disprove.
It's like a mythos,
Yeah.
right? Like everyone knows that it's kind of comparable to Rome, you know? Like
Romulus and Remus weren't real. Like no one thinks Romulus and Remus were like real people.
Right, but they're still kind of treated like they. It's so weird, man. It's so weird.
Yeah.
It's like it's like a mythological foundation of a civilization where even if you prove that it's fake, we're still going to act like it's real, you know?
Yeah. And again, like it became real, like the spiritual Holocaust didn't really come into being in like 1944 or whatever. Like it came into being in like the 50s and 60s slowly, and then really after like the 7-Day War. That's when,
what's
like,
so interesting when it comes to dude. Some Jew wrote a whole book about this. Oh my god, I forget his name. And it was like in the 70s.
Yeah.
And he was going and talking about like in the 40s, we didn't hear about the Holocaust. We didn't hear about this stuff. You know, and what's interesting is you remember when Fuentes went on Piers Morgan and Morgan started asking him about the Nuremberg trials and how that proved the Holocaust. That to me proved that the average person actually has no idea what like the historical orthodoxy is regarding the Holocaust, because every historian will tell you that the numbers that they presented at Nuremberg were false, and that the people that supposedly died, the numbers they presented at the Holocaust in specific camps, these were false. And what they've been doing since the Nuremberg trials is switching around the deaths in the camp to get to the 6 million number.
Yeah.
But everyone recognizes that what the Soviet Union presented at Nuremberg were false.
Yeah.
You know, it was not recognized that only around 1.8 million people died at Auschwitz. That was not what was happening at the Nuremberg trials.
Yeah, yeah. And so like the interesting thing here in like the small community of Holocaust deniers, it's like it's been kind of like, you know, the parable of the blind man sort of feeling the elephant, and like one feels the tail and thinks it's a rope, and the other one like a leg and thinks it's a tree trunk, and so on. Because like the facts have never really mattered. What matters is like the holy like energy imbued in this thing. The thing is though, once that holy energy is gone, ironically, like it won't even matter whether like these gas chambers had wooden doors or whatever. Like nobody will care. Like it will, like it's a project that only makes sense when it can't work, because like people just ignore everything, and then the moment that people are willing to listen because it's no longer holy, they're not going to be willing to listen because they don't give a fuck. Like it's like trying to tell people about the Guelphs or the Ghibellines or whatever, like, or the true numbers of people that died at like the Hippodrome riot or whatever in 300 AD. But what we're seeing right now, it's just that like this entire mythology is breaking apart in front of our eyes. And this is why like people say, well, Israelis are Nazis. And it's like, someone saying that is just like trying to salvage like the mythology, like the mythos here.
That's
where,
the
like,
shit that Finkelstein would actually try to say. You know, like that's, you know, but decades ago, you know, like that was you remember the famous clip of that Jewish girl approaching him about Israel and the Holocaust. And he's like, how dare you use the suffering of my parents to justify this genocide? Like that is something that was used decades ago. Now everyone is kind of on board with the fact that we shouldn't really care about the feelings of Jews. That's just my opinion. I don't think you should care. And a lot of people seem to be getting on board with that. I think we brought it up last time we talked when Vosh went and did the early life check. You remember this?
Yeah.
And so that's
yeah,
kind of where we're at
one.
now. Yeah.
And like the issue here is that if you think about another group that's kind of like, there was a really interesting period in time in Sweden, in like the Swedish political debate during the 2010s. Like I want to say like 2013 to like 2016 or something like that. Like it was a few years before Trump descended the escalator. Essentially, you had this debate about like so-called EU migrants, and EU migrants is a nice word of saying Roma, which is a nice word of saying nice way of saying gypsies. And so you had like this term that suddenly like Swedish leftists started using, which is anti-Ziganism. And the Swedish term for anti-Semitism is anti-Semitism. So you can sort of hear, even if you're not a Swedish speaker, that like this is anti-Semitism, but we just switch out like Semites, Jews, for travelers, Roma, gypsies, and because an old way of saying gypsy in like Swedish, like the rude way is zigenare, therefore anti-Ziganism.
One thing that just kind of frustrates me about this stuff is in the discourse, people are coming around to the fact that you should just say Jew, you should not care about Jewish feelings, but people still try to tiptoe around that,
Yeah.
And I don't know, just frustrating. And you brought up the word anti-Semite, and one thing that comes to my mind is, the Palestinians are Semites, they're the real Semites.
Yeah.
Jews are like Khazars. It's like, no, that's not true. And everyone thinks that anti-Semitism means Jew. No one, it doesn't actually mean Semite. That's not why they say that.
Yeah. And so the reason I brought up like this sort of like the newfangled like idea that like apart from anti-Semitism, there was like this other thing which nobody had heard of before, but it's like anti-Ziganism,
right?
Or anti-gypsies, because people sort of backticked from saying like, okay, well, there is this sort of the passion, like the Holocaust, and which stemmed from sort of mankind's sin and like racism against the other, and therefore if that's true for Jews, it must be true for gypsies because they are like this marginalized group and so on. And so people just basically came up with the idea, like they didn't really know, anyone who sort of talked this way didn't know anything about like actual sort of like gypsies living in Europe. But they just assumed that like things must work this way. So they had like this period of like pro Roma like advocacy based on the idea, like based on the idea that like Roma were people like everyone else who were just sort of like, because of racism,
the gypsies are people too.
Yeah, like they weren't allowed to go to like send their kids to school. They weren't allowed to like work normal jobs and pay their taxes. And like, we need to destroy this racism so they will become like just like you and me. And every time this was tried, like it led to like farcical, like people sort of invited these sort of migrants who came here to beg on the streets, like to have them live in like student sort of like these nations, like student nations, which is kind of like fraternities essentially.
Right.
And like what would happen the moment you gave them like a sleeping spot inside a fraternity is they would like disappear the next day and like the safe would be broken into. Right. And so eventually like all of this stuff was just quietly like retired because like nobody could say, well, these people are just fucking thieves.
Well, the funniest part there is that it's also just beautifully ignorant of the history of gypsies, which is the Europeans begging them to just be normal. It's every European people. It's just like, could you please work on the goddamn farm? Pay your like. It's like, please go to school. Like every the invention of public
What's
school
interesting
in
about
Germany, probably the first thing that happened after Bismarck invented the public school was they invited the gypsies. Like, oh, please, God, could you come?
Yeah.
Like,
so just to let me finish this point, like really quickly, like
you got it.
the lesson that people really didn't want to learn, and was never really articulated openly, but kind of lingered in the back of people's heads and was like really sort of awkward, was like gypsies historically, like they are a minority group, like a minority group living in various sort of majority societies that really want them to start paying their fucking taxes, okay? Like getting a normal job, sending their kids to school. And if they do this, and like the majority of gypsies, like you have a shit ton of people in Sweden, in like Spain in particular, like these people are like the descendant of gypsies. They're the descendant of the gypsies who got a fucking job. And guess what happens if you get a normal job? You start intermarrying with the majority, and then your kids don't even know that they were supposed to be gypsies in the first place. So gypsy culture has this incredibly strong, like in-group solidarity, which is matched by an incredible hostility towards the out-group, which is why they do all of this stealing and robbing and so on. And that's not just because they're fucking mean. Like they have morality and they apply it. It's just that, like, in order to prevent themselves from being assimilated, they need to maintain their distance. And so you get where I'm going with this, right?
Yeah,
what
I
I'm
get
gonna
precisely
say next.
where you're going with this, yeah.
Like, at the end of the day, the attempt to sort of say, well, like gypsies, they're kind of marginalized because they're not allowed to be like normal people and pay their taxes. That was the leftist line. But then everyone realizes that, like, if they don't marginalize themselves, their culture is going to die, which is, you know, maybe not like a huge drawback if you're only concerned about your tax base. But in the eyes of their own culture, that is, you know, the worst thing that can happen. And so they have all of these things that make them hated, which are there by like evolutionary design. And the problem right now is that, like, if you listen to normal Finkelstein, he is almost just spoon feeding you the same story about American Jews. Like, he doesn't really want to go out and give it in the sort of schematical sense that I'm presenting it. But like what leftists are starting to realize is that, like, no, there is this thing, like the reason that you have like this small minority and they don't get absorbed into like the majority society is because they have this sort of internal cultural structure to prevent that. And, you know, you coming from sort of the right, you could say, well, Kevin MacDonald wrote all about us.
Yeah.
You know, people
he also
that
wrote about
well
gypsies, interesting enough.
Yeah. And like, this is kind of the realization here that, like, this old mythology about like the original sin, like Eve eating the forbidden apple offered to her by the snake, and the apple is like anti-Semitism. And so you wake up one day and you say, well, I don't think Jews should be allowed to pay taxes. Like, that was never really the problem. The problem is that you have this group that can only survive by being kind of awkward, because if they're not awkward, they end up like Max fucking Blumenthal and his kid.
Just saying fuck it, yeah.
Or like Dave Smith or whatever. Like, Dave Smith is not a quote unquote like good Jew in the sense that, like, will his kids even care? I mean, chances are they probably won't.
Well, I have my contentions with Dave Smith.
Yeah, sure, but like, you get what I'm saying.
Yes.
And so like, we are kind of at this point where we talked about, like, should you be afraid of anti-Semitism or whatever? Like, normal Finkelstein himself is an anti-Semite, like a rabid anti-Semite in this old like mythology, because he is basically saying, well, Jews are kind of different for all of these structural reasons, and they behave kind of differently, and for like rational reasons in order to sort of maintain their separateness.
Right.
And and like the entire lie of like the mythological like Holocaust that was created in the 70s and 80s was essentially that, like, the Nazis rolled out of bed one morning and they said that, like, these people that are identical to us and act like us and so on, we should just fucking kill them because they're so identical to us that we have to invent an ideology to sort of separate us. And it's like, no, that has never been like the historical experience of, I mean, before it was anti-Semitism, it was anti-Judaism, and it was like a thing for rational reasons. Like, if you're a Christian and you have people who reject the divinity of Christ, like, you kind of have a point of contention.
Well,
but
yeah,
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, K-Mac's written the books on this, right? How did Jews come to be who they are? That's the first book of People That Shall Dwell Alone. And you mentioned gypsies earlier. In the preface of it, or in the introduction, he goes over certain groups that he thinks matches Jews, and a prime example is the gypsies. But putting that aside, he has a second book about anti-Semitism, and he basically says that, anti-Semitism historically has been a rational response to Jewish behavior. And it's because you have two groups competing for resources, right? And the Jews are usually the foreigners. And before we had this mythos of prejudice and bigotry or wrong, these people were just dealt with. And they were always dealt with by the people who actually interacted with Jews. See, this is something that a lot of people don't understand. Is now we have the talking point of like low IQ anti-Semitism, right? The people, but the same people who do that want to make reference to like 109 countries, right? The people who were doing that were the low IQ people. They were the peasants. They were your average person. It was the people who actually interacted with the Jews who hated them. It was the upper class, right? The nobility and the clergy and whatnot who were sympathetic and were always essentially forced to be the ones to be like, okay, you can't be here anymore. You got to go into exile. But it was always the people who actually interacted with the Jew that came to be anti-Semitic. And that was always just the average person.
And there's also like an interesting tension here. It's not just from the outside, but from the inside as well. Like when people say, you can't be an anti-Semite if you're like a Christian because Jesus was a Jew.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like that is the low IQ critique. But like if you have like above a room temperature IQ, you kind of realize that there is something kind of gnarly here, which is that, yes, I mean, the first Christians were like Jewish schismatics. Like they were, like they created this sect that basically denounced Judaism for being this non-universal, like ethnic, like tribal religion. And so, I mean, this is kind of, you do, when you point out that like peasants and so on in Europe kind of hated the Jews historically. Yes, that is true. And the counter argument to that would be like, well, cynical kings kind of used them as moneylenders and so on for like kind of reasons of state policy and so on. Which is
but that's
true.
Also not true, though.
I mean, it is kind of true. I mean, because they like
it's complicated.
They did that to the Knights Templar, right? Like they fucking executed them, like the French king, because he didn't want to pay the debt. So like, but like, if the argument here is that like these people were hapless victims, that is completely incorrect, because like there was kind of this push and pull where both sides tried to take advantage of the other. But also, there has always been like this internal pressure inside like Jewish communities where like a bunch of Jews historically don't really want to be living under the tyranny of the rabbi or whatever. Like,
no, they don't. They don't.
Yeah, like so like you get these kinds of explosions where like you have this revolt against being like a particularist I mean, Marx has these famous like screeds against like what is the god of the Jews? Money. Like what is his religious hucksterism and so on. Like he is kind of acting on the same impulse in that sense that like the early Christians did. But the point here is just that like, I mean, whether you read K-Mac or not, or whatever, or whether you're a leftoid or a rightoid or a Christian or an atheist, like the problem we're facing today is essentially that, like, the whole mythological sort of once everyone like kind of went to the same high school and paid their taxes on time, and then someone ate the forbidden apple of like racism. And then eventually, like people started saying, well, you have to live in the ghetto or whatever. And you gypsies, you have to do crime because you can't go to our high school anymore. Like that story is not, it's not believable anymore. And so I do see leftists who, and I kind of hinted at this in an earlier conversation, like if you believe in universalism, which again, I mean, Christianity was really revolutionary, like because it was just unashamedly universal. Like it said, here there are no men or women, no Jew, no Greek, no Roman, all are one in Christ. Like that was scandalous at the time. And like if you're a leftist, you are kind of the inheritor to that tradition, even if it's like in a later secularized form. And if you do believe in that universalism, like at some point you kind of you have to stare the truth in the face. But like the problem here isn't like that sort of, oh well, Max Blumenthal, he has like the evil gene or whatever. And again, like the history of quote unquote like anti-Semitism, how many percent of that history have people even known that there are quote, like genes? Like how long have they reasoned in those terms? Like it's not very long. Like the problem here is just that like this sort of particularist behavior, like people have this sense that like we had this ideology, even like in America, if you think about America as this great social experiment, like everyone plays according to the same rules. It's like a creedal nation. It's not about your blood, it's what you believe in. And so like if you believe in that story, you really believe in it. What do you do if it turns out that a certain group of people or certain groups of people pretend to believe in it, but then subvert it from the inside in order to secure benefits for their own group? Like you have to put your foot down. You have to say, sorry, this is not how the system is supposed to work.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
like,
I agree. I think that's a good place to end it. Do you have anything else you want to talk about, or?
No. We can stop here and maybe get back to like the issue of the eternal boomer at some other point in the future.
Well, now they're telling you that like eating out is like a luxury, and like drinking a soda, like that's like a luxury thing now. We're just supposed to pretend. You know, it pisses me off because I will talk about this a little bit, I guess, how MAGA's reacting to the explosion of prices due to the Iran war. Everyone remembers what you said 4 fucking years ago during Biden, dude. Like, everyone and I agreed. It was horrible. There was no policy to deal with the rise of gas prices. We caused a significant increase of the prices due to the war of Ukraine. We, in my opinion, I think America and NATO is guilty of that, and that certainly caused gas prices to go up. And a big problem and I've made this point before, and it's because America is not a serious country. America doesn't deal with these problems.
Yeah.
When there is inflation and it is caused by an oil spike due to geopolitical upheaval, America never has a policy to deal with that. As soon as this stuff kicks off Russia and China immediately do stuff to counter it, right? They
Yeah.
they cap oil exports, they do some type of limited price control, something. America never does that. It just lets it happen, and you just got to eat it.
Yeah,
And
and I think that. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just said the only solution to this is that you're told that stop eating out. Go fucking get a Lunchable for lunch. That's what you have to do now.
Yeah, I'm working on a sort of big theory. I'm just going to hint at it, and then we can close off, because I think it's something to return to, maybe in a future episode or something. Because it's
if you write an article about it, we'll bring it on and talk about it.
Like the big thing is, it's not just about oil. It's like, if you think about like the life world for Americans, where not like city planning and like building suburbs and so on, like a lot of the model for that, like if you live in, like I live in Uppsala, it's a town that's been around for like 1,000 years. So on the summers, I occasionally like wander out to like the old Uppsala, as it's called. Like it's these burial mounds for old like Norse kings. So like this place has been inhabited for like more than 1,000 years actually, and like the cathedral, like it started building like in the 1400s, and then it was finished like 300-400 years later. Like there is kind of like, these things have been around a long time, and even though it's like a modern city with, you know, buses and trains and all of that, like there is a sense that like, even if we sort of regress to a medieval society or whatever, Uppsala is still going to be here in 1,000 years. In America, you like a lot of municipalities and so on, like they plan, like they build stuff, and it can only like last for 60 years or 50 years or whatever. And you have these sort of financing models where like you can only fund like maintenance on sewer lines by building more suburbs, and if that growth ever stops, like the entire thing collapses. And then you have like Arizona, Nevada, a bunch of other places in the Sun Belt, like they're not going to be livable in like 50 years. Like the water is going to run out and so on. And so there is kind of this like if this was in Russia, people would be trying to say, okay, well, our population can't live in this area anymore, so we have to move them. Like they did that with like the Chernobyl disaster, for example. Like they just moved a lot of people. But in America, it's like everyone is left to their own. And that is kind of something, there's something broken about the culture. Like like as a lot of people on the right would say, like, it's not a real nation, man. And there is some truth to that.
I think that is true. It's not a collective. It is just a nation of individuals. I think that is true.
And I mean, we can return to this topic at some future point, because I think
that does deserve a whole episode on its own.
Yeah. Because like the big sort of thing that has to be the project of the future is trying to create some sort of nation, actually.
Yes, I definitely agree there.
Like you can't just be like Nick Fuentes saying like, we're gonna have the empire with Venezuela or whatever. Like
we're gonna have the American empire, but it's not gonna be Jews. It's gonna be us.
Yeah, like there is nothing to return to. Like something new has to be built.
Yeah, Lewis kind of talked about, he wrote an article about this, and he kind of said how American nationalism isn't possible because the way that people identify the groups they're a part of have like no basis of anything that resembles a nationhood. It's about like what it's political ideology or it's something around those lines, but it's never the way that the in group is defined in America is never like actually your blood, which is the entire point of forging a nation.
Yeah,
it's because that concept is completely foreign to America, I think.
Yeah. So let's put a bookmark in that discussion and return to it at some other time, because there's a lot of stuff to cover there as well.
And we've been going at it for a while. This is the longest episode we've ever had. I appreciate you coming on, Tink Zorg. Do you want to shield anything before you go?
No, not really. I mean, I might write an article about this, so I'll shill it down, I suppose.
Gotcha. Well, thanks for coming on, man, and thanks everybody for watching. Oh yeah, I really enjoyed it. And we'll see everybody in Valhalla.